Hello, I'm Brett Knowles from PM Squared Consulting. This is an overview of one of the big kept secrets about OKRs, and that is you're managing with only 10% of your available data. 90% is hidden. Let's talk about how that happens. So I'm going to set up a 2x2 here. So on the left side, we're going to talk about metrics, the key results or KPIs. And they come in two categories. One is known metrics. Known metrics are measures that you collect and report on, and they're stored somewhere that's accessible, a shared drive, whatever that might be. The unknown metrics, on the other hand, those are information that's collected but not accessible. Might be on the back of a cigarette pack, on a standalone spreadsheet, and they don't appear in any report. So you're investing money to have that data collected, but it's just not used by the organization. On the bottom axis, we're going to take a look at strategy, both known and unknown strategy. So the known strategy, that's what you have in your strategy documents, your PowerPoints, and your all-hand meetings. The unknown strategy is the stuff that's, beyond the tip of the iceberg, the stuff that's below the horizon, stuff that is critical to the organization, but is not included in a strategy. Or it might even be tactical. It might not even be strategic. And so if we divide this into 4 quadrants, we can take a look at each one. So up here in what I'm going to call known. So I know my strategy and I know the metrics. So that's where OKRs live, right? They have defined goals and defined outcomes. And so think of that as sort of business as expected. And so that's our primary focus. And that is where 10% of your data lies. And that's where it's supposed to lie, right? OKRs are all about focus. They're supposed to ignore this other stuff, but let's talk about what that other stuff is, because it doesn't change the fact it's still happening. So known strategy, but unknown metrics. What that looks like is, let's say you've got an objective that's green. The objective level, we're hitting those, customer sat levels, but the key results are all red. What does that mean? It means there's a disconnect between the key results and the objectives. If the objective's being met and the key results indicate it's not, these are obviously the wrong key results. In other words, we have the wrong metrics, and therefore, when you're using your OKRs, you're looking at the wrong things. Obviously, that's a problem. Top left, that's where we don't know the strategy, but we know the metrics, right? So those are metrics which are outside of your OKRs, but they're impacting performance. So an example would be recently there's a large beer company that used a spokesperson that might have been deemed to be inappropriate by their core customers, and they took a significant performance loss. Well, that is a metric that was recorded. They should have known, those Facebook and social media posts were going non-linear, but the sales were going the opposite direction. But they weren't part of their OKRs, and therefore they didn't see it happening. So, obviously the strategy there is go solve the problem and then find out whether you need to add it in the strategy. But the net is that's where you're blindsided. That's where things happen that you didn't expect. And in hindsight, you should have been tracking. And that beer example is a current example of what that looks like. Then the last is where I don't have a defined strategy and I don't have metrics. What does that look like? It looks like things are going on in your organization, but you don't expect them, you can't see them, and you don't even know what's going on. And in those, you're totally blind to them. So that's kind of the framework that we're going to set up. And again, OKRs are targeted for and hit this over here, and they ignore these other 3 quadrants. And in theory, that's what it's structured to do. Why? Because we only have so much data, we only have so much management time, etc. And so we just understand where we need to focus our efforts and we ignore the rest. The dilemma is the rest of it does impact business. Now, what I'm going to do now is change the size of these boxes in proportion to what we actually see in our clients. And typically, it looks a bit like this. What we see is those OKRs look at about 10% of the data. We have another 10 or less percent of where we clearly have the wrong indicators and we need to deal with it. There's a portion that's blindsided, but by far the largest portion is where we're completely blind. Things are going on that we have no idea about. And again, this is the theory of constraints. We only have so much management time and so much reporting, and therefore we've got to prioritize where we look. And so we look along that known strategy. So if we take a look at this in a bit more detail, typically we see that OKRs only cover about 10% of the operational data, which makes sense. The problem is that leaves 90% of the organization unaware of what's going on. And so the bulk of that information happens to be on the side that we call blind. Whether I'm blindsided or just plain blind, the bulk of the information is over here. And obviously that's a mistake. So now we have magic. We have AI. AI, tools like Microsoft's Copilot can take a look at your proprietary data behind your firewall and give you an assessment. Now I'm going to change the box size based on what we see when we use AI. What do we see? Well, first we see that AI speeds the learning organization. So what it means is we bleed this looking at the wrong things faster. So as soon as we determine we've got a wrong thing, AI points it out to us and we can go change our objectives and key results. Now, on the blind side, because AI looks everywhere, both on the OKR data and all the other data, and it looks 7 by 24, it never sleeps, and therefore significantly reduces that whole blind side. And in particular, it allows us to sort of support and identify better, faster, cheaper, all those things we get blindsided. So this data that's on standalone spreadsheets we now bring into that common database, and all of a sudden AI can guide us towards it. What does that mean? It means now we're managing the business with 80% of the data, both what we have in the OKRs and also what AI can support us with as we go forward. So it's an obvious enhancement to OKRs to have AI take a look at all the other data in light of this strategy and continually give us advice and heads up on issues that are going on.